lose weight and to really be able to keep it off without the traditional dieting approach. So I'm going to be giving you lots of tips and techniques tonight to, number one, to be able to change your relationship with food, and also to be able to naturally reduce your desire to overeat. Okay? So we're going to focus really on how to use the power of the mind to break through whatever is stopping you from being able to lose weight and again, keep it off permanently. The key is about permanency. Now, what is the basic problem with diets? Well, most people are not aware that the most common reason that diets fail as a permanent solution is because people seldom understand the underlying and psychological and emotional causes of being overweight. Really and truly, being overweight is just a symptom. There's 29 different reasons that people eat other than pure hunger. And it's absolutely critical to understand them to be able to overcome them. Now take a moment and think about this. Do you know why you eat the way you do when you know it won't help you lose weight? Do you know when you're eating too much or eating the wrong types of foods? Do you have a sense of, in that moment, what's really going on for you? You know, we say that there's two sides. There's the devil and the angel. The angel saying, you know, this isn't really good. It's full of fat and sugar. But there's another part of us, okay, and that's what we want to deal with tonight. So there's a conflict between your logical side, which says I shouldn't be eating this, and your emotions, the part that's saying I shouldn't be eating it. Now, the emotions are on a subconscious level, so it's really difficult to be aware of that in the moment. And we're going to look at how to solve that tonight. Your logic is asking you, how much weight do you want to lose? So take a moment. How much weight do you actually want to lose? And why do you want to lose the weight? So your logic has these thoughts in your mind that say, I want to lose, whether it's 20, 30, 40 pounds, to look better, to feel better, to have more energy or health. And there's a whole host of reasons. Some people want more confidence, self-esteem, and the list goes on. So you would know for yourself what are the reasons. Now, on the emotional side, there are some real underlying reasons that we have. And I mentioned there's 29 different reasons, and I'm going to cover just a few here. So we eat sometimes because we're bored or maybe anxious or stressed. Some people eat for comfort. A lot of people want to eat as a way of exerting control, to do what you want, or as a reward or a treat. And so basically this conflict here is between that logical side and the emotional side. Now, let's say you are about to have a piece of cake. Okay? In the moment that you're about to have the piece of cake, what are the benefits? So what do I mean by that? Well, in the moment, you may in fact be getting some kind of a benefit, instant gratification, or be able to get what you want, or be able to relieve stress. And again, there's so many different reasons. I'm just using this as an example. So in the moment, you are getting the benefits. You are getting the rewards. You are getting whatever it is that you're getting from eating that piece of cake. The second you bite into it, there it is. Now let's look at the logical side. What benefits does it get in the moment if you don't eat the cake? So let's say hypothetically you're standing on a scale with a piece of cake and you're just about to put the cake into your mouth, and at the last minute you put it down. Are you going to benefit with respect to your weight? Is your weight going to go down in that split second? Now many of you are going to say, perhaps if I eat this way I will gain weight, but in that split second the scale isn't going to change. So there's no benefit to your weight in that second of not eating the cake. Is it going to make you feel better about how your body looks in that split second? No, it won't. Are you going to look any better? Absolutely not. Not in that split second. Is your health or your energy going to improve? No. So what we're seeing here is there are really no benefits, logically speaking, to not eat the cake. And here, there could be many, many different reasons. So it produces the conflict. Okay? So the question is, what is the solution? Well, we need to understand, again, part of the problems in order to really get to the solution. It's not about what diet you're on or how many calories you're counting. That is really a secondary issue. Here's one of the big problems. When your mind knows on some level that there's no benefit in not eating the cake in that moment, because it's not going to affect how you look or anything, and there are good benefits here, why wouldn't you eat the cake? If you can get a nice reward or a treat or comfort yourself or distract yourself from any of this instantly, but it won't affect how you look or your clothes or anything, why wouldn't you have it? So what ends up happening is we tell ourselves, I'll just eat this now and be good tomorrow, or start my diet next week. And when that happens, we develop a program in our minds. And a program is something that occurs on an unconscious level with a thought or an action, and it's repeated over and over and over again. So every time you say, I'll just have this now, you're reinforcing it on an unconscious level. And you really aren't aware that you're doing that. The other problem is when you take the food away, because really what's happening here is food is giving you all of these benefits, okay? So when you take the food away, you're also taking away all these benefits. So when you take the chocolate cake away in the moment, you're taking away the reward and the calm, comfort, whatever it's doing for you. And of course, as we said, there's no benefit in that. So what happens for your desire for food if you're just about to have a piece of cake as a reward and then your mind comes in and says, no, you can't have it? Well, your desire actually goes up, okay? And then the mind kicks in again and says, no, you shouldn't have it, and then you want it even more. And this keeps escalating. The more you say no, the more you want it. And that may take a little bit of time to kick in. You might be on a really strict diet for a few days, weeks, months, and do really well, but deep down there's this crazy urge. And what ends up happening is we binge, either in the midst of the diet or as soon as we're off it, we can go off the deep end. Now the biggest problem of all is your mind is saying, okay, discipline, willpower, that's what I need. If I can control myself, then I can handle it all. So there's a part of us that feels we don't have it. And here's the problem. That part is trying to conflict or fight off this part who says, well, I just want it. I just won't do what I want. So you have this battle between willpower or self-control and another part of you that's saying, well, I just want it anyways. And what ends up happening is your belief that says you have no control is causing the problem. I'm going to give you a bit of a hypothetical example here. Let's say you were about to eat that piece of cake, and at the last minute, your fairy godmother appears and has scientific evidence that says if you don't eat this piece of cake, you're instantly going to lose all the weight you want and you'll never gain it back no matter what you eat. So what ends up happening there is obviously you won't eat it. And in so doing, you are using control. So therefore, you have self-control. You have as much of it as you ever need, but you choose to use it at various times. It's very different than saying you don't have the control. When you have the control to not eat it when your fairy godmother, I mean, I know it's a bit of a ridiculous statement. However, the bottom line here is that you have an unlimited amount of control. And the key here is to teach yourself to recognize that you have a choice. A choice is very different than a lack. And so these are some of the conflicts and the problems that diets really don't address. And so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to say, okay, well, if food is doing this for me, all of these benefits, all these rewards, is there a way that we can duplicate the benefits of food, this process, however it works in your mind, how food can relieve stress, how food can comfort you, because it's not the food, it's your relationship to the food. So the question is there a way that we can do that? Is there a way to duplicate or replicate these specific benefits? And that's what we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. Okay? We're going to look at a number of techniques and strategies to be able to overcome that need and the desire to eat for those various reasons. And so what I'd like to suggest for a moment is just a 1-minute brain break. You know, you've heard some information. I know you guys have been on the line waiting and some technical difficulties. So just take a moment and just relax your mind, take a few deep breaths. Now the first thing we want to look at is your thought process, because it's all about your thinking. This is called your possibility of success thought. Now, what is your belief about you being successful? And success is what I mean by losing all the weight you want, keeping it off, and never dieting again. So let's say that 10 means you believe it'll happen for sure, 100%. And 0 means it's probably not going to happen. So that's the matrix on which we're going to measure. Now take a moment. On a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you believe that you're going to lose all the weight you want and keep it off and never have to diet again? 0 to 10, what do you believe that is for you? So let's take an example. Let's say you said 50-50. You know, so 50% says yes, it'll happen for sure. Another 50% says I doubt it will happen. So do you think that it's possible that this belief that has any doubt will actually affect your results? Well, obviously it will, because it's going to sabotage you. It's going to send unconscious messages. For example, you're about to have that piece of cake, and your mind steps in and says you shouldn't be having it. But again, if that belief comes up that says, well, I really don't think I'm going to succeed. I've failed in the past. I've tried so many different things. If that unconscious thought is anywhere present, this is going to result with you saying, why bother? And why would you bother? Why would you give up the cake in the moment if there's some part of you that doesn't really believe that you're going to succeed? So what we need to do then is to recognize this and to begin to look at that belief and to challenge it, okay? And to say, well, wait a minute. Yes, I've been on so many different diets and I haven't succeeded, but does that mean that for certain that I can't succeed in the future? And if you believe that, with all due respect, that's a false belief, because anything's possible and you can succeed even though you may have failed many times. And that is the number one reason that people believe that they may not succeed, is because of all the past problems and errors and different diets that they've been on and that haven't worked. But I'm going to give you an example of two brothers, the Wright brothers, who invented the airplane. Now, before they set out to do that, it has been proven that it can't be done. It was never done. Many people tried. But these two guys had a belief system. Remember that word, a belief system that was so strong that said it's doable. And every time they failed, they just went so-called back to the drawing board. And so what I'm proposing is perhaps the past has failed because of a method you've used or for whatever reason. And you're obviously on tonight seeking some kind of an answer. And what I'm going to be talking about is a very different approach. that does deal with the mind. So I'm not going to guarantee success to anybody, but I will tell you, wherever you are in your life around this, you need to be open to the possibility that it's going to happen for sure. Because if you aren't, you're going to sabotage yourself. So that's one of the most important things, to really let go of all past failures and what that means in the moment. Okay. Now, number 2, we want to look at a very powerful concept here, which is about how you perceive yourself, or how you see yourself, how you see your body and your weight. Okay. Your thoughts about your body. How you think determines what you do. And your actions, what you do determines what happens. And so I'm going to give you a very simple example of this. You've all heard of Donald Trump, I'm sure. Now, if we look at his thought process about himself, it's been documented that he feels that he's a very wealthy person, even though he's gone bankrupt a number of times. So that thought process leads him to do the actions of a wealthy person. So he's into real estate or his TV shows or whatever he's into doing. Now, those actions produce, the big bucks, so to speak. And what ends up happening is when he produces those big bucks, it simply reinforces how he sees himself. So the key here is that your thoughts are what will determine what your actions are. Okay? There are people, I'm sure, who, build houses and do well. Donald Trump would never think of building a house. It's not how he sees himself. He's going to build a hotel, and that's why he generates a lot more than the person who builds the house. So, having said that, what are your thoughts about your body and your weight? Are they positive or negative? Now let's assume that they are negative. So you're saying to yourself, I'm fat, I'm overweight, whatever the things are that you say to yourself. And what are your actions? Well, you may be eating too much or eating the wrong types of foods. And as a result of that, what happens? Well, of course, you have the extra weight. But here's the kicker. The extra weight reinforces how you see yourself. And therefore, you're going to be more likely to act that way. With all due respect to you guys, you are more likely to act like a fat, overweight person because that's your inner reality. And again, on an unconscious level, if you are about to have that cake and you decide maybe I shouldn't, if you have this belief system that says I'm overweight and fat, you're going to be prompted to act that way because that's what works for your subconscious. And again, you put on the extra weight and he reinforces how you think, and this is a cycle that keeps going. Unfortunately, diets basically focus on the actions. Don't overeat, eat this, eat that. They don't focus on the underlying causes of your actions, which are your thoughts and how you see and think of yourself. And again, this is on a very unconscious level. Your thoughts basically create a domino effect. So this thought here affects this and this and this and this. You think of yourself as fat, determines the actions of what you do, how you eat, which determines your weight, and this cycle goes. Now, when you're here in the midst of eating, it's very difficult to go against this, the momentum of the domino effect. So what we need to do is to change the whole direction, so to speak. I'll give you a very simple example of that. We've all seen a sailboat, and if you notice at the bottom here, the rudder, that's what directs where the boat's going, in the back and in the front. Now, if your thought process says, I'm fat, it's like your rudder is pointing to that. Thought process drives action. And regardless of what kind of diets or programs you embark upon, This is constantly going to go back to that place of being fat and overweight because that's where you're pointed. Again, your thoughts point you in a direction of action. So it's absolutely critical to change the thought process once again. And it needs to be done on an unconscious level and repeated over and over again because the way you've gotten to where you are now is by unconsciously repeating, and even consciously, you look in the mirror, you try on clothes. What are you telling yourself? I hate the way my clothes, all of that. So you're basically, we need to change the thought process, okay? Now, I'm not suggesting that you look in the mirror and say, oh, I look fantastic and wonderful, because your mind isn't going to buy that. But what we want to do is we want to be able to neutralize the negative thinking. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we have to be aware of them. And, it's a little challenging to do, but there is a process where you can almost like listening to yourself as you're feeling uncomfortable and saying, well, what am I saying to myself here about my body? And then you'll hear it. I'm fat. And then to look at, okay, well, I'm saying that I'm fat. Is it possible I can change that negative thought to, hey, this is how I look. It is what it is. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just this is my body in this moment. I can't change it. I'd like to, and I'll do what I can. But in this moment, it is what it is. Now, to give you a bit of a reinforcement on that, I have worked with a range of people. Like I've worked with over 5,000 people over the last 20 years or so. And, let's say you need to lose about 20 pounds, okay? I have right now a woman who needs to lose 100 pounds. And she doesn't really mind how she looks because she needs to lose weight because of her health. And more than likely, if any of you were 100 pounds overweight or more, you probably would feel a lot worse than you currently do, okay? Now the flip side of that is, I also have a young woman I'm working with who's a model, and she is about 108 pounds, 5'8", and you can just imagine. She feels worse about her body because she's being threatened to be cut out of the main lineup, worse than you can probably ever imagine that you will feel. So what does all that mean? It means that it's not really what you see in the mirror that's the problem. It's your thinking process about it. What you see in the mirror is an image. It's like looking at a painting, and then your mind kicks in and starts commentating on that painting. Oh, it's fat, it's, all of the things you say. So again, we need to separate the two and say, hey, there is the image, there is my body, and it is what it is. I can't change it. And here is what I'm saying about it. Now, is it possible to change what I'm saying about it in this second? Of course it is. Am I willing to? So are you willing to try on some clothes that are tight or look in the mirror and not appreciate what's there? And again, say, look, this is my body in this moment. What am I going to do? If I wake up this morning and go to bed at night, I'm going to have the same body. So how is it going to help me if I really judge myself harshly? And some people say, well, I was a certain weight when I was younger. All of that's relevant. But in the moment, sorry, guys, it's not going to change. So again, what we want to do is learn to let go of these negative thoughts, which, as I mentioned before, is going to change your rudder, change the whole domino effect, and you'll be amazed at how quickly things change when you begin to change your thinking about yourself. Okay? So what we're going to do again is just take a moment, a little brain break, and have an opportunity to just maybe take a few deep breaths. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is your relationship to food. Now, what am I talking about here? Well, relationships with food are no different than relationships with people. We have a certain dialogue, we have a certain frame of reference, the way we act. So this is how the typical person speaks to themselves. I should lose weight and watch what I'm eating. I should start my diet. Like, how many times do you say I'm going to start tomorrow? Often. following restrictive plans or meal plans, eating secretly, feeling guilty, all of these things, and there's many, many more. There's many, many more different aspects of having a certain relationship with food. And I'll call this the diet mentality. Now, if you look at the average person who doesn't have a weight problem, they don't speak to themselves in that way. They're not eating secretly. They're not feeling guilty about what they eat. They're not saying, oh, I shouldn't eat this. They might say, gee, this may have a lot of fat or sugar, and maybe I will have a little bit less. But they don't have that crazy on and off, up and down thing that I'm sure you recognize. Now, this diet mentality actually creates a tremendous buildup because your dieting and your depriving leads to rebelling and sabotaging and binging. If you tell a child you can't have something, we all know what happens. They want it more. So you have to maintain a strong upper hand, and the kids can wear us down. But the more we maintain our position, the more they rebel. And it's a tough battle. And if you transfer that into the idea of eating, it's tough to maintain discipline and willpower every minute of every day. So you do it for a few days or weeks, and then you just go off the deep end because you've deprived yourself. Now again, when you deprive yourself of the food, you're also depriving yourself of all those benefits. It's not just the taste of the food, which seems like all that it is, but it's that comfort, or it's that feel good, or it's that stress relief. So when you're restricting yourself from the food, you're telling yourself, sorry, you can't have the reward, you can't feel good, you can't relieve your stress. And those are very fundamental needs that we have. So what we really need to focus on is how to change that diet mentality and to create a more neutral mentality. And what do I mean by a neutral mentality? Well, think of how you relate to water. I have a glass of water here on my desk. I can have a sip, I can drink the whole thing. There's no big draw. For me, my issue when I was growing up as a kid, it was pizza. If there's a pizza around, it's hard to, but the water, it's nothing. It's just neutral. So that's the type of mentality that would be extremely helpful to you to stop the frustration of the dieting and all of the back and forth, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So we want to really change how you think about food, not just what you're eating, because obviously that's not working. It's as you're thinking. I'm going to say that over and over again. So how do we do this change our relationship with food? Well, let me use another example here. Let's say if you were growing up, your family owned a bakery, and you worked there and you went in there and every day, and it was great, and you had your friends, and just wonderful. You can have what you want whenever you want. Sounds good. One day, your family sits you down and says, you know what? From this day forward, you're not allowed in the bakery. You're banned. You can't have any sweets anywhere else. We're going to hire a private detective to follow you around. You're never going to have sweets again. Now, I know that's a little bit ridiculous, but when you're dieting, in a sense, that's what you're doing. Maybe it's not never again, but for those days, weeks, months, or however long, you're saying to yourself, that's it. I'm banned. I cannot have any of this. Because the better you follow the diet, the better the results. So what do you think happens to your desire for the cake or the sweets when your family has now told you, sorry, you're never allowed to have it again? What do you think? I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's going to go up. Simply because you're deprived, you're going to want it more. And that's, again, typical for the dieter. Once again, the dieting, the depriving, the restricting produces the rebelling, the sabotaging, and the binging. Now, using this example, let's say your family was away and there was a large order for cakes for people who are having a wedding and the baker is baking it, it's all fresh, just coming out of the oven, and at the last minute they get a call, the wedding's been called off, and he's got this beautiful wedding cake and all these custom designed cakes that he doesn't really know what to do with. And he's going to have to throw them out. And what ends up happening is he is literally headed to the garbage. And he sees you, and he knows that you have been banned, and you guys are kind of friends a little bit. And he says to you, look, this cake has been paid for, but it's going in the garbage. No one's going to know. So why don't you take whatever you want, and I won't tell anybody, you can't tell anybody, and just enjoy. But this is a one-time only opportunity because you're banned. What do you think would happen? I mean, it's pretty obvious. You would probably eat as much as humanly possible. Why? Because you've been deprived, and because it's been a one-time opportunity that's been presented to you. And I know that's an extreme example, but think about it. When you're dieting, what happens is you be following the plan, and then maybe for some reason you go off for you're at a party or you're away or out for dinner or something, and then the mindset kicks in that says, you know what, I've blown my diet, so I might as well just party it on up and finish it all up, or finish the bag of cookies that I have, or finish the cake, or get it out of the house, or whatever it is. In a sense, you're right. Like, you might as well eat it all because tomorrow you're starting your diet again. But guess what happens? That is an up and down, never-ending battle. Okay? And so that's the diet. It's up and down, never-ending. Yeah, you may take a few months or years off, but with all due respect, most of the people that I have worked with have been dieting, many years. And I'm just assuming that you're in the same boat. It's and it's not the next diet that's going to make the difference. I'm not trying to disrespect any of the diets, or a lot of them are very sound and healthy, but the model is it doesn't work as a permanent solution. And it's because of a lot of what I'm saying, your thoughts, your relationship to food. So if we go back to our example, if we want to look at, okay, well, how do we change all of this? Okay. Well, let's say your family comes back in time and makes a decision and says, we feel we've been wrong. You can go back into the bakery. You can go in there as often as you want, eat as much as you want, whenever you want. Obviously, for the first few days or weeks, maybe you're probably going to really overdo it because you've been totally deprived. But what do you think is going to happen to your desire after you've been allowed to just go free for weeks or months, as opposed to having been completely deprived? What do you think is going to happen to your desire if you can just go back to the old, I can eat as much as I want, whenever I want, I can have a slice now, I can come back in 2 minutes? Obviously, your desire is going to go down to overeat, okay? Now, that's not about willpower or discipline or anything like that. It's just obvious. And that's what the goal here is, to be able to let go of that up and down kind of, good and bad, wrong and right, on again, off again. It's never ending. So to be able to let go of that and have a very natural diet-free way of living. If you look at the average person who isn't overweight, there's a reason they're not overweight. And yeah, maybe metabolism comes into it a little bit, but it's because they have a different relationship with food. Like, do you ever see these people if they're at a restaurant and they've got, a piece of cake and they leave, a few forkfuls or, half a slice on the plate, and you look at them, it's like, how do you do that? Well, they do that because they're not deprived. They can eat the whole thing. They can order 20 pieces in their own mind. Again, it goes back to like water. So what I'm trying to say here is the diet system does not work. And it's not your fault. It's the system which has been promoted so heavily to us. and which we have tried. I'm sure many of you have tried to lose weight on diets and you've been very successful, but it doesn't last. And so you think it's your fault because you haven't followed the plan every day and you had willpower and discipline. Well, guess what? That doesn't work. So, changing your relationship with food, letting go of that thinking process, and there is more to it than just what I said. You need to be very cognizant of how you talk to yourself. Instead of saying I shouldn't eat this, you may say, well, if I eat this, there is going to be a lot of sugar and a lot of fat that goes into my system. But I can if I want to. There's the big distinction. It's not that I can't or I shouldn't. It's I have a choice. And today, this is my choice, and I make the choice. The moment you have that choice and power back, you're not following these strict rules. We all know what it means to follow a reasonable, healthy way of eating. We don't have to be told, not to eat cake and French fries. And like we know, I mean, probably many of you can write your own book on diets. So again, it's not about what you're eating as much as what's going on in your mindset and how you treat food and how you think of yourself. And as you become more and more aware of that, and you begin to shift it into a more neutral way of doing it, you're going to find that you just don't really need to be on a diet as much as you think you do. So I hope that was helpful. We're going to move on now to another very, very important, more really practical technique here that you can use. And this is about increasing your awareness. So there's a number of questions that you can ask yourself in the heat of the moment. You're having that slice of cake and then you go for a second one. And just asking yourself in the split second, am I truly hungry? Have you ever heard of mindless eating? Mindless eating is when we just eat because it's in front of us and we want to finish our plate and we don't even know that we finished it. I had a weight problem myself growing up, so I remember being in a movie theater, with these gargantuous sized popcorn bags. And I'd be sitting and eating and watching the movie, and at some point my hand is touching the bottom of the bag, and I kind of, like, well, what happened? Where did it all go? Well, it's mindless, that we're not really aware, and we're certainly not hungry, and we're certainly not aware that we're not hungry, okay? So when you become aware of that, and I'll give you an example in a moment, it short circuits a lot of the mindless eating. Now, I'm not going to say it's always going to work. Maybe 20, 30% if that works for you, great. For some others, more. But you want to be aware of what you're doing to be able to have a chance at changing it. So let's say you're aware that you're really not hungry. Well, then it's time to check into how you're feeling physically or emotionally. Are you tired? Are you stressed? Are you bored? Are you looking for a reward? What's the real benefit of eating, of course, other than the taste? Now, this is not when you're hungry. So why are you really eating? And as I mentioned earlier, there's 29 different reasons. Most people do not have an idea in the moment of why they're doing it. And they just do it anyways because it tastes good and they say, I'll start again tomorrow. So by becoming aware of what it is that you really need in that moment, again, it's going to short circuit a lot of mindless eating. Now I'll use an example with myself, again going back to the pizza story. When I was growing up, the friends would go out for pizzas on, the weekends and have burgers and all that stuff. And it was very much associated with fun. And for me, pizza is equated to fun. So sometimes to this very day, if I've had a long day and I've 10 o'clock at night, there's a thought that pops into my mind to order a pizza. Now, I'm aware that I'm absolutely not hungry, okay? How am I feeling physically? Probably maybe a little bit tired. Emotionally? Mostly I feel like I deserve a reward or something like that. So what's the benefit of eating? Well, that's going to be fun. So what do I need in the moment? I need fun, okay? Now, the moment that thought registers into my mind consciously, I'm able to say, you know what, you're really not hungry. What you really want here is fun. Now, you're not on a diet, so if you really want to have the pizza for fun, go ahead. But generally, when I'm even given the permission by myself to do so, it loses its appeal. You know, it's funny, sometimes I'll go online to order the pizza, and as I'm ordering it, you know, putting on all the ingredients and looking, I'm already having that sense of fun. And, you know, sometimes I'll get to the purchase button, I'll go, you know what? I don't really need this dough with cheese on it. It'll taste good for 2 minutes, and then I'll feel really kind of crappy tonight and in the morning. So what do I need? I need fun. So what am I going to do? Well, maybe I'll go on the internet, or I'll call some friends, or plan a trip or something. Now, it's often not as simple as that, but without awareness, you're kind of up, you know, what's that expression, a paddle without, you're on a, well, you know what I mean. You got to be aware and to understand how to work through it, you know, because discipline, forget about it in that moment. You know, if I'm really tired and I want a pizza, you know, I'm just going to say I don't care and I'll eat it anyways if I'm not aware of what it is that I really want. You know, so discipline and willpower, especially in the evenings when a lot of us have the biggest problem, that's the hardest time to have discipline. You know, we've expended all our mental energy all day long at work with kids and home. At night, you just want to just be free and just, you know, I call it the happy stupid hour. Don't want to think about anything. Don't want to worry about anything. The last thing you want to do is have to try to restrict, you know, just having a nice whatever makes you feel good in the moment. You know, it's there. You can rely on it. Just go in the kitchen. So it's a tough battle. But when you do become aware, you can begin to change things in your life to realize, hey, I need more relaxation in my life, and here's how I'm going to do it, as opposed to just saying it. So again, awareness, absolutely critical, makes a huge difference when you begin to understand why you behave the way you do. Now, this is probably the most significant solution that we're going to talk about. It's about being able to clear the thoughts and messages in your mind that triggers the unhealthy eating. Now again, this comes with awareness. You know, most of you probably are not in the position where, you know, it's 10 o'clock at night and you're, you know, going for some snacks, for you to say, you know what, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm bored, I'm going to go eat because this is how I feel. No, it's automatic. You don't even know half the time why you're doing it. You're just doing it. So the reason you're doing it is there's a message. There's a thought. It's an unconscious thought in your mind that actually triggers this desire to eat. Okay? So the solution is to learn how to clear these thoughts. Okay? And so there is a very powerful technique I'm going to talk a little bit about. It's called mind clearing. Mind clearing will actually release these messages from your mind to eat too much or the wrong types of foods, unhealthy, and to stay in a consistently content and peaceful place. Okay? Now, if you can imagine yourself just being content, at peace, feeling totally satisfied as if everything is looked after, taken care of, not a thought in your mind, I would tell you that you're not as likely to eat in the way that you're currently eating. You might still have that cookie or that piece of cake, but you're not going to go back for, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5. The reason you're doing that, with all due respect, whether you know it or not, there's something driving you. If it's important for you to lose weight and you know that cake isn't going to help, there's got to be a reason, and it's beyond just the taste. So there are these messages, and the mind clearing will teach you how to release these messages, and for you to just consistently be at peace with respect to food and content, and, you know, as long as you're not hungry. Now, the question is, well, why can't you be consistently content and at peace with none of these messages to eat poorly? Well, obviously, there's things going on in our life. You know, things happen at home or at work or in our relationships that, you know, brings up stress. And you know, we really are not going to realistically be feeling that way. Okay? So let's say, hypothetically, the goal is to actually experience more peace and contentment around food and not have those messages. Okay. Now I'm going to use this example of this round sphere, the sun, to be representing this calm peace, lack of messaging. Okay, and the reason I use this is the sun is always shining in the sky. I mean, sometimes we don't see it, but what I'm suggesting is there's always a possibility for things to be peaceful. I mean, you've had it in certain moments, but there's something going on as to, these things going on in our life that's stopping us, which prevents these thoughts. So let's use the analogy here again with the sun. The sun is in the sky 24 hours a day. So why isn't it consistently sunny all day? Now, the most obvious reason are the clouds that are in the sky. So what's really interesting to notice is that on the rainiest day, if you're walking down the street, even though it's gray and dark and rainy, the sun is still shining, right? It's still up there. You just can't see it. So you're just experiencing all this cloud, but the sun is still shining through. Now, in the same vein that the clouds are blocking the sun, preventing the sunshine, these thoughts and feelings that come from your life about various things, something happens at work, you start thinking about it. Something happens with your husband, you start feeling certain feelings. These thoughts and feelings are what's preventing you from just being calm and at peace. I promise you, if you take away those thoughts, you will be more peaceful, obviously, right? Now, I'm going to use another example here. What if we had the ability to create a giant wind machine in the sky that's blowing consistently 24 hours a day? Again, it's a little bit of a far-fetched example, but just go with me here. So you've got this incredibly powerful wind machine consistently blowing the clouds in the sky, which would result in no clouds, which results in consistent sunshine, right? So is it possible to somehow do the same thing with our thoughts and those feelings? Is it possible to let go of those unwanted thoughts and feelings, to release those messages in your mind to eat poorly? Is it possible to get rid of those clouds in the sky to see the sunshine? Well, is it possible to get rid of those thoughts to create just pure peace and contentment? The key, though, what I'm going to talk about here is consistency. We've all had these moments, but how do you sustain them? How can you be peaceful and calm when those around you are not? When, the kids are doing what they're doing, when work's so, how can you walk through life in a peaceful way? And it's a metaphor for how can you walk through life without needing to eat in a way that you know doesn't help you. It's by getting rid of these messages, okay? So the specific technique that I was talking about called mind clearing has a few different components, but the mind clearing technique is the same as that wind machine, so to speak. It's going to get rid of thoughts and feelings and be blowing consistently so that you're consistently here in this calm, peace place. So let's talk a little bit more about that. There is something in your mind called the release mechanism. Okay, we were all born with that. It's the ability to take your focus off of one thing and automatically put it onto something else. Okay, so let me give you an example of that. Right now you're listening or looking at this webinar that we're doing and probably somewhat focused, and if your fire alarm or smoke detector went off, you would immediately release your focus on the computer screen or the telephone immediately and get out of your house. Now that ability to stop listening to me and get out of your house is triggered by this release mechanism. It's instant. You don't have to sit there and go, gee, I'm hearing that sound. What should I do here? Should I listen? No, you instantly release what you're hearing or seeing. And so that's called the release mechanism. Okay? So let's just use another simple example. Let's say you're watching a TV show. You're watching a hockey game. You're sitting with, somebody, your husband or, your wife, and you're really not enjoying it, but they're watching it. Okay? So what ends up happening is you're developing, these thoughts and feelings of maybe boredom or frustration or what have you. And your release mechanism can shift and let go of these with what? With your channel converter. Because the minute you press that button, you're now off of that and perhaps onto a show that you like. American Idol. Or maybe you're now beginning to feel excited or happy or joyful or whatever. So you went from frustration and, boredom to excitement by the flip of a switch, simply by pushing a button instantly. So that's the release mechanism. Now, the mind clearing technique is a way to attach that release mechanism to your breathing. Okay? Now, why do we want to do that? Well, we are breathing consistently. So if we can trigger that release mechanism every time you take a breath, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be consistently letting go of these thoughts and feelings that are standing in the way of you being able to be calm and content, and more importantly, to be free of those messages to eat poorly. Okay? So this is not at all about willpower or any kind of following diets. It's about creating a consistent state of contentment around food and around things in your life where you just will not be headed for and turning for food the way you might be right now. The beautiful thing about this technique is that it applies into so many other areas in your life. As you practice this type of thing, and there's a lot of different methodologies out there that you may have heard of, but if you're doing something like this and doing it a little bit every day, you begin to train your mind so that every time you take a breath, you're consistently letting go of anything around you that's really bothering you. I give an example of my father, who is a wonderful man, but he's a stress bucket. If I go back to that story about the fire, if the two of us are in a room and there's a fire, my dad would really get upset. And he'd leave and go and save himself. I, on the other hand, would just be more calm and say, okay, we have to get out of here. And I'd go. I can walk with him and get out of the fire. It's not like I sit around and just, stay in this content place. But the metaphor is to be able to walk through life peacefully, content, and still deal with, work and home and all of the things. And again, it does certainly help with releasing all of these messages that are, really the things that are driving us. Okay, I hope that was helpful to you. What I'd like to do is just to do a quick summary here. So we talk about changing that belief system that said, I'll just eat this now because it doesn't really matter. Okay? No, it doesn't matter in that moment if you have that piece of cake. But if you keep telling yourself, I'll just eat this now, you continuously reinforce that way of being. So you need to change how you think about that and recognize the way I make my decision about whether this matters or not is important. I know that each moment matters, even though I may choose to eat the food, but the moment matters because every moment is what makes up your life. We think about the future. Well, the future is made up of each moment. So if you have a pattern of thinking in each moment and you keep repeating that, you're going to keep doing it. So again, changing the program about, I'll just eat this now and it doesn't really matter. Now, getting to some of the real core things is to strengthen your belief about the possibility of you succeeding, and for you to really take on a 100% knowingness that maybe you don't know how it's going to work and how you're going to do it, but that it's totally possible and doable. Because without that, it's like locking the door. You'll never get through it if the door is locked. Anything's possible, okay? So you also want to change your thoughts about how you see yourself. As you recall, that's kind of like that domino effect. It's going to lead you to action. So the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, is just getting to neutrality. Getting positive is a little bit of a stretch. Letting go of the diet mentality is critical, especially for some of you who've been on a lot of diets, and it's just your brain is programmed, and it's sometimes challenging, but maybe from hearing what I'm saying, you can kind of go down that road. And changing the relationship with food to a more neutral, peaceful kind of way that you may relate to water. And and the last thing we spoke about was the mind clearing, which is really powerful in being able to train yourself to let go of these cravings, these messages, simply by taking a breath without knowing even why it's working, because what we've done is we've trained the mind to activate that release mechanism every time you take a breath. So I'd like you to take just a minute to do one simple exercise here. And I really would like you to take this seriously and get as much out of this as you can. So maybe even if you're comfortable, close your eyes for a moment, or just, try to stay focused. Are you really, really ready to lose weight for good? Now, why do I ask that question? Obviously you do, or else you wouldn't be here. But again, let's talk about the underlying reasons. There are some people who want to lose weight, but deep down there's parts of them that, they may get some attention that they had in the past from people that they're not comfortable with. Now, that's just an example. So even though they want to lose weight, there's something driving them to keep the weight on. So the question is, are you 100% truly ready to lose the weight? Do you really, really want it? Do you feel you deserve it? And are you sure? Now, if you answered yes to all of those, nothing will stop you. I'm going to give you an example of something like this. Let's say a mother is told that if she doesn't do X, Y, Z, her children will be hurt. The mother will generally be in a different state than if she wanted to do something. She would be in a state of needing to and having to. Whatever was asked of her, she will do it, period, the end. That is what will get it done. If she says, well, I want to and I'd like to and I'm going to think about it and I'm going to, get back to them on that, fine. But if she wants it done, there has to be a shift in energy. And, I've created that unrealistic example, or maybe not that unrealistic, but if, a mother has the possibility of their children being hurt and, someone says, I want you to walk 50 miles or your kids won't be hurt, the mother's going to do it because she has to do it. So when your need is truly powerful, and nobody can make that happen for you, and you don't even know if it's that powerful or not. The only thing that's going to prove it is what you do. Now the fact that you're on this call, having responded to, some invitation, however you came here, you are obviously informed that this is a very different approach. So you're looking for something different. Okay. Now, be it continuing to, perhaps work with me in the future, or however you find it, I can promise you that you will absolutely get to your goal if you have to, if you need to, and if it's a non-negotiable. You know, my clients, the most successful ones are the ones who, when I first talk to them, say, I am fed up. This is unacceptable. I am unwilling to continue my life this way of this up and down dieting, and I know there's got to be another way. I don't know what it is, but I've had it. And that is sort of like with the mother, like I have to do it. And I promise you, if you have that in you, you will do what it takes and find the solution. And with all due respect, actions speak louder than words. Nobody can give you this burning desire. It's either there or not. Maybe you'll have it tomorrow, maybe you'll not. When you do, you can part oceans. Nothing will stop you. And maybe if you have that in you, you can tap into it. Now, if you do have any kind of inkling of have to, need to, want to, don't know how, but it's going to happen, the next step in what you need to do is to find out the real underlying reasons you're overweight. You know, when I say the real underlying reasons, if you've tried to lose weight for years and tried different diets and it's not working, you can't blame the diet. You can't blame your lack of discipline and willpower. There's something else going on, which is possibly why, again, you're drawn to this type of information. But however you get there, you have to find out the real underlying reasons. And then you really need to figure out what your unconscious triggers are. Because it's not just about the taste. You know, if I ask you on a scale of 0 to 10, how important is it for you to lose weight, and you say it's a 9 or a 10, and you're still eating, you know, stuff that you shouldn't be eating at night, there's got to be some unconscious triggers that are driving you, and without knowing what those are, you know, it's going to be really hard. And then what you need to do is discover anything else, you know, that's stopping you from losing weight permanently. You know, there's probably some very obvious things, but, you know, there's always a way to a destination if you figure out where you are and where you want to go. You know, you might run into roadblocks and, you know, get lost, but if you're trying to get somewhere and you know where you're going and you don't get there, there's a reason. You know, there's something stopping you, and without knowing that, it's going to be pretty hard. So you can choose to do these steps now or later. It's your choice. There's nothing wrong with doing it later or thinking that maybe there's some other way. In my experience, these are critical to begin the path of a permanent solution. Now, I really wish you all the best. I'm sorry it's taken so long. For those of you who have expressed an interest in working with me personally, there is an opportunity to do so. And the first step in that process is to do what's called an awareness mapping program. Awareness mapping is a 90-minute session with me over the phone or in person. And we take appointments, you know, during the day or evening, Monday to Friday. And during that session, that is exactly what to do. I call it like a mental x-ray. We will go through from birth to this moment your thought processes, how you've been conditioned, why you act the way you act, not because just you're hungry. All of your unconscious triggers, anything that's in the way that's really stopping you. And it's like an x-ray. You need to know this information. So if you feel that you may want to do it with me, I'm available to do that. The professional fee for that one session is $295. And we do have what's called a satisfaction guarantee policy, that if you're not fully satisfied for any reason at the end of the session, you'll get you'll get your money back. Now, we have a special program as well. If you are willing to do a survey after the session, and the survey is basically a little bit of a dialogue with me, just for me asking your opinions about the process and so forth, which is very helpful to me. So if you are open to doing that, then we will give you a discount. If you're not comfortable with that, then you can just do the regular fee if you'd like. Now, for those of you that would like to proceed with this, you can pay with either a credit card or a PayPal or a debit card. And right now, I believe the registration is open. You can call this number 1-866-791-7546. For those of you who are listening, you can also register on a website, which is www.coachrobsugar.com. And that's sugar the regular way, believe it or not. That's my real name. So it's coachrobsugar.com, and that is fully secure payment site. Or again, you can call 1-866-791-7546. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you got some great value tonight. I'm going to leave the screen on for a moment so you can, write down the number or the website and enjoy.